Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, the Oracle games, and the Minish Cap. Whew, now that that's out of the way, I'll tell you right now none of those games appear in this video. I don't expect you to agree with me on every one of these, but stick around because I think you'll really like the last one. Let's go over my top 5 picks and see if Nintendo might ever make these a reality. Number 5. Twilight Princess Picross. Initially released on March 30th, 2016 for the Nintendo 3DS, this game was exclusive to the My Nintendo Rewards shop and could be purchased only by cashing in 1,000 My Nintendo Platinum points. If you've ever played a Picross game, you'll know instantly what this is all about. Picross is a math-based puzzle game played on a tile grid. The goal is to uncover a hidden image. You win by placing X's in the squares while trying to avoid the ones that would have a tile that creates part of that image. If you select all the correct boxes, the image is revealed as your prize for winning and you move on to the next puzzle. As you can guess, all of the puzzles in this one display Zelda-themed images. This game is on my list not because I'm a big Picross fan, but because I believe very strongly in game preservation. This game was only available in a very limited way, and so few people have played it or even know about it. Nintendo could easily port this to the Switch and drop an affordable price tag on it, making it available to a massive audience. And they should, because in March 2023, the Nintendo DS eShop is going to close forever and this game is going to be lost to history. Number 4. Four Swords Anniversary Edition. Originally released in the US as Four Swords on December 2nd of 2002, this title started its life as a bonus game on the Game Boy Advance port of A Link to the Past, and it was Nintendo's first attempt at a multiplayer Zelda game. Fast forward to September 28th, 2011, and we were graced with an updated and remastered version called Four Swords Anniversary Edition. Biggest change that was made in the remaster was the addition of a single-player mode. This made it much more accessible to players who didn't necessarily want to rely on someone else to be available to play. Sadly, they only made this single-player Anniversary Edition for 2 very short spans of time, and again, it was digital download only. You could get it on the Nintendo DSi from September 28th, 2011 to February 20th, 2012, and then again from January 30th to February 2nd of 2014. After that, it was gone and became an adventure you may never get to experience. Number 3. BS Zelda and BS Zelda Ancient Stone Tablets. Now these are technically 2 separate games, but I'm going to include them together here because of their similarity and the fact that they shared a very unique method in the way that the player could acquire them. You see, in the land of Nintendo's long-lost technology, there was once a device called the Broadcast Satellaview. It was an attachment for the Super Famicom that allowed you to download games to your console all the way back in 1995. It was released in April of that year, but only in Japan. If you were a subscriber to the service, you would be able to download and play a great variety of games from Nintendo's main franchises and even some high-quality third-party games from companies like Konami, Capcom, Square, and more. It was way ahead of its time. Now that you know about the hardware, let's get back to the games. The first one is BS Zelda no Densetsu, aka BS Legend of Zelda. Games in this series carried the BS tag to indicate that they were specifically for the Broadcast Satellaview hardware. This game was a 16-bit reimagining of the original Legend of Zelda game. The map was condensed, but was very similar to the original. The dungeons, however, were a little bit different. This game was only available to play for a few predetermined hours each week in sessions, much like a broadcast television show. You played it live along with everyone else, while a live announcer would speak from time to time to tell players about events that were happening in the game and power-ups that they would be given for periods of time. The goal each week was to conquer the 2 available dungeons in that session and acquire the Triforce pieces within, along with snagging any items or weapons that were available. Each week for a month, you would be given 2 new dungeons until you completed the game in the 8th dungeon. The other Zelda game for the Satellaview was BS Zelda no Densetsu Inishi no Sekiban, aka BS Legend of Zelda Ancient Stone Tablets. This one is kind of a sequel to A Link to the Past. It takes place a few years after A Link to the Past and centers around a human kid that is mysteriously transported to Hyrule and must become the hero of light. Link does not appear in this game. Instead, you play either as a boy character with a baseball cap or a girl character with bright red hair. Just like in the previous game, you can only play during live 1-hour sessions while they are broadcasting each week. And, just like before, there were 4 episodes to enjoy. Modders and preservationists have painstakingly gathered the remaining save data from these games off of the old Satellaview systems, and pieced the games back together for people to play now. The only thing missing is the live announcer. You can pick these up on reproduction cartridges, on eBay and other places, and enjoy them for yourself. But I want to see an official release. Package these together, Nintendo, add new voice acting for the announcer, and use AI to randomize the events so that it feels live. Don't remake A Link to the Past, give us this instead. Number 2. The CDi Zelda Games. Yeah, you heard me right. People generally only talk about how terrible these games are, and they're not entirely wrong, but hear me out. We all know it has become popular to hate on these games nowadays, but I'm going to ask you to think for yourself. Have you ever played them? Most likely not, seeing as they were made for a console that failed before most current gamers were even born. And with the reputation, I bet very few people even seek them out through emulation. With that said, it's my position that in spite of their comical flaws, they are absolutely salvageable. There were 3 Legend of Zelda games for the Philips CDi. The first 2 were visually beautiful, and in my opinion were even ahead of A Link to the Past, which was stunning in its day. The things that plague these games are the insane difficulty, cheap deaths, not nearly enough frames of animation, and worst of all, the bizarre cutscenes. Oh, and the script. We can't forget how terrible that was too. But how many games have been remade or remastered where they gave the full suite of quality of life improvements, like better controls and more player-friendly design? It could happen. They could absolutely make this work. The third Zelda game for the CDi was called Zelda's Adventure, and it was very different from the other 2. While the first 2 were side-scrolling action-adventure games much like Zelda 2, Zelda's Adventure returns to the top-down style the original had. There were primarily only 2 major problems with that one. Zelda and the enemies were pre-rendered sprites much like you would see in Mortal Kombat, and it contrasted poorly with the low-resolution textures of the map that she moved around on. Additionally, the game had rough transitions from screen to screen that would often lead to instant death by way of random enemies having the advantage over you as soon as you appeared. These things could easily be remade and fixed. How cool would it be to see a modern top-down Zelda game where you actually got to play as Zelda? Nintendo, I challenge you, use the original stories and the general format of these games, but modernize everything else. Drop all 3 onto a physical cartridge for $60 and I'm gonna buy at least 2 copies. I was planning to do an honorable mention here, but I became so invested in the title that I decided to devote a full video to it, so that will have to remain a surprise for another time in the very near future. But be sure to subscribe to this channel while you're here, so you don't miss out on that video when it releases. That brings us to my number 1 pick, and without wasting any more time, number 1, Link's Crossbow Training. Made for the Wii to highlight the gun control capabilities for the Wiimotes, Link's Crossbow Training went absolutely under the radar. This was not a big game, but it was different than anything that Link had ever appeared in before. Link's Crossbow Training took place in the world of Twilight Princess and used its visuals to place Link into an on-rails shooter-style game. Its 9 levels and 2 bosses can be completed in under an hour, and it's beautiful from start to finish. I hope if they do release an updated Twilight Princess HD for the Nintendo Switch, that they will include this as pack-in bonus content because it's really a lot of fun. If that doesn't happen, however, I'd like to see this one remastered in HD and fleshed out to make it a longer, more complete experience. Well, that's it! My top 5 games from Zelda's history that I would like to see remade or remastered for modern players. Did I miss any that you think should have been included? Tell me in the comments section down below, and if you're still here at the very end, thank you for sticking around. You might even want to click on one of these other videos to explore some additional content from Pixel Gallery. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.